The Chicago Bears are going to ask a lot of this year's rookie class. So it's important that we have realistic expectations for how these first-year players should perform.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. On the show today, we start with this Bears rookie draft class, making sure that we set expectations that are not unrealistically high, but also understanding that these are going to be players stepping into some pretty big roles, particularly those earlier draft picks over the later picks. But we'll kind of look at, for Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker, mine must be on food. For Brisker, how should a rookie cornerback and a rookie safety in the second round come in and play? Not the top 10 picks, but this more range. How do recent players in those draft slots at those positions produce? How do we measure that success for them? We'll, of course, turn our attention to Bayless Jones at wide receiver and why third-round receivers haven't been super productive, so we should keep things realistic there. Dominique Robinson, the later-round edge rusher, what we should expect for him as a raw player with some real upside there. Of course, all the late-round guys, the offensive linemen, 4 of them, Treston Ebner, Trenton Gill, Elijah Hicks, and really the whole kit and caboodle there of this Bears draft class, just for that sort of rookie season. Because when you think about the cornerback and safety position, we most often, if you look at just their stat sheet, right, you pretty much see interceptions, maybe pass breakups, maybe forced fumbles, tackles, I guess. I mean, it is a stat, but it's not really a way to measure. You don't measure the best cornerback was the one with the most tackles. No, that's not really how that stat tends to go. So it becomes, especially in a rookie season situation, a little bit less, I guess, measurable success in the traditional ways, right? I think back to Jalen Johnson's rookie season just 2 years ago, and that would seem to be like a pretty good bar to compare Kyler Gordon to, right? Jalen Johnson didn't have a single interception his rookie season, and that didn't make it a bad rookie season by any means. We want more turnovers, perhaps some interceptions from Kyler Gordon in general, but especially because it's going to be a big push from Matt Eberflus's defense. We have seen Gordon be a little bit more of a ball skills playmaker in college than Jalen Johnson, who's always been a little bit more of the physical press man-to-man corner and a little less of the big-time turnovers, although he certainly had them in college. And so I think it's about how you sort of appear. It's about the eye test a little bit. It's about the feeling you sort of get from watching Kyler Gordon's rookie season, right? I don't care if he has 0 interceptions, it's not going to mean he was a bust or had a bad rookie season. And at the same time, if he has 4 interceptions, there is more to having a good year than just the number of interceptions you have, because it's those 4 plays out of the 900 plus he might be on the field for this season as a starter. I mean, that's sort of where I think the expectation should be for Kyler Gordon is first of all, start week 1 and be that every game starter this season. Don't somehow fall back in a rotation with players, because this team does not have the cornerback depth that would suggest, it's okay that our second round pick is rotating with them. It's not like they're loaded up with veterans who are going to start over him and he's competing for a tough spot to start. No, he's essentially being handed that starting job, and it would be far below expectations if he doesn't keep that starting job throughout the rest of the season. There can be mistakes. There can be, occasional lapses in judgment, but it's about just sort of looking like he belongs, looking like he fits looking like he's ready to keep progressing forward. Doesn't have to be perfect, just needs to be about that fit. Because I think when you think about the safety position with Jaquan Brisker, it's a similar kind of thing, especially I think with Brisker at the strong safety as opposed to the free safety. Because like you think back to like Eddie Jackson's rookie season, he had a few interceptions, and we have seen in recent seasons rookie free safeties really roaming the back end, making some plays and setting some big expectations early in their careers. But strong safeties, especially with a skill set like Brisker's, don't necessarily tend to, on average, produce in quite the same ways right away in the rookie season. Not that they have bad rookie seasons, but you don't see the massive splash of turnovers necessarily from the type of role we're expecting from Jaquan Brisker. So I think less to expect Eddie Jackson's rookie season and maybe more to expect Adrian Amos's rookie season. He was certainly exceeded expectations for him as a 5th round pick. I think Jaquan Brisker, you would be more expected to play at about that level. Look like you belong, hold down the starting job, try and limit the mistakes as much as possible. Be a consistent tackler. Step up and make those. You don't need to make the big plays all the time, but just make the plays you're supposed to consistently. Don't be the last line of defense and miss that tackle to let the running back break free, right? Step up, make the tackle behind the line of scrimmage when you're there. It's not about forcing 5 fumbles or picking off 5 passes as a safety or racking up some arbitrary number of tackles this season. It's just about look like you belong, do your job, and give this team what looks like a foundational player for the future. We know there's not those first-round expectations. If these guys never become Pro Bowlers, they can still be worthwhile second-round picks at the cornerback and safety positions. Just need to show us that they look like they're on that path of like, okay, solid, some mistakes here and there, but you learned from them, you got better as the year went on, and you get excited then going into year 2 that maybe there can be some kind of jump of like, okay, where we're really seeing the basis of what could be a long, extensive career and not have any of these like questions about, oh man, like this guy's just not getting it. Just look like you get it, look like you fit. And I think that's hard to measure in a way that we can go back and point to and say, here, he's had this much of a stat. It's not a stat, it's a feeling. But we got that feeling from Jalen Johnson 2 years ago. And I think it's realistic to expect that similar type of feeling from Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker. The expectations from there obviously step down as you go later in the draft, and certainly with those 2 second-round picks being the first picks, there's a little bit of extra cachet held on to them. But once we sort of move on here to some of these other players, the expectations come down, but that doesn't mean our hopes have to come too much farther down. We'll take a look at Bayless Jones, Dominique Robinson, and the rest of these Bears draft picks next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at BlueNile.com. They're here to help you celebrate all of life's special moments, from creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams to giving a classic and timeless jewelry piece, all at prices you won't find at traditional jewelers. BlueNile.com has been around for a long time. They're not just some pop-up out of nowhere jeweler. They've been doing this online consistently for the last couple of decades. So whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find that jewelry as unique as she is with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. No matter what you're looking for, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, so you can find that perfect piece for you that fits your price range, that speaks to exactly what you're looking for her. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On Bears listeners are going to get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more. It's a podcast exclusive that includes engagement, so use our promo code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON. Plus, every order is insured, it ships for free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. This episode of Locked On Bears brought to you by our friends at RockAuto.com. Another one of these stalwarts of the online industry. They've been selling auto parts online for over 20 years, multiple decades of delivering you the greatest depth catalog anywhere online for auto parts. They can have anything you can possibly need for your vehicle. It's there at rockauto.com, and it's super easy to navigate. You just enter in your car's make and model, and boom, pulls up all the different parts you need for your vehicle, and then you can sort by the brands, the specifications, or even the prices you prefer. Because some of the chain part stores will have a different price tier for professional mechanics versus do-it-yourselfers like us. But rockauto.com's prices are the same for everybody. So don't spend up to twice as much for the same part somewhere else. Head on over to rockauto.com today and check out all the parts available for your car or truck. When you do, fill out their box that says, "How did you hear about us?" and let them know, write the words "Locked On" in there, and let them know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. We all want to see Bayless Jones come in as a third-round pick and excel, right? Add some speed, add some fuel to this wide receiving core that is, at best, lacking, right? At this point, we know there's some talent there. There's a lot of unproven talent, and we want to see that talent, improve, prove themselves and grow into bigger roles in Chicago. But it makes for a great opportunity for Bayless Jones to step in and, outplay his draft position specifically. But I think it's important to keep in mind how rare and uncommon it is for wide receivers drafted as late or later than Bayless Jones, especially in recent years here, to produce at super high levels as a rookie. Now, this draft class in Bayless Jones might be a little bit different because Jones himself is an older prospect, a lot of older prospects in this draft because of the COVID year, giving all these players an extra year. So while it was a knock on Bayless Jones coming out of the draft, there's some thought process that it could also make it an easier transition because he's a little bit more physically developed than, say, a 20-year-old coming out of college early into the NFL to play with other older players. Bayless Jones a little bit more, as an older player, a little more settled in. But, third-round picks in his range recently haven't been overly productive in their rookie seasons. None of that is to be a referendum on how they're going to perform for their full careers. But you look back at last year's draft, this most recent rookie class, among those players outside of the top 10, the top 5 to 10 wide receivers drafted, you get into that late second to third and fourth and beyond round. Nico Collins in the third round for the Houston Texans was kind of the most productive of those day 2 receivers in that range. He had 33 catches, 446 yards, 1 touchdown. I think that'd be a pretty good bar to set for Bayless Jones. And that's not to say if he falls short of that, is that a disappointment? Not necessarily. I think much like the defensive backs, there's also a feeling aspect of this. Does it feel like Bayless Jones is a playmaker? Does it feel like he's a home run threat? Does it feel like he's making guys miss and providing a dynamic weapon for the offense? Because sometimes the production doesn't always come there, depending on the opportunities and how the other receivers play and how Justin Fields plays and how the offensive line plays. But for Bayless, I think it's important that when he does get the ball, do you get that sense that he can do something special with it? Do you get that sense that they're not just forcing him the ball to get him some kind of touches to manufacture something, but that actually there's a great value every time he touches the ball? When you look in that third round range, otherwise, most of the time, those type of guys are in 200 to 300 yards a year, 175, 250, 315. That's about where these third round wide receivers most often tend to perform. You can look back to last year's rookie class and see Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Lions. Their 4th round pick had 90 catches and 912 yards and 5 touchdowns. It does happen. Breakout wide receivers in late rounds. Darnell Mooney, 61 catches, 631 yards, 4 touchdowns in his rookie season. That's not the norm, and that's not fair to expect from Bayless Jones. If Bayless Jones had 25 catches for 250 yards and a touchdown this season, when you say that out loud, it feels disappointing, right? It's you'd like something better, but that tends to be how third round rookies perform. They can't all be first round Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase types. It sort of skews our perception of how rookie receivers should perform. But keep in mind where Bayless Jones was drafted, that he's going to be a very fair to expect he should be just more of a truly complementary piece at wide receiver and not a featured weapon the way Amon-Ra St. Brown proved to be for Detroit last season, and of course Darnell Mooney has proved to be for the Chicago Bears. That's just not realistic for a guy like Bayless Jones. He can still have a great rookie season and leave us excited about him in the future and growing into a bigger role in this offense, but let's make sure we're not expecting him to be even a 600-yard receiver. Would seem like a lot to expect from Bayless Jones, let alone 1,000 yards or anything crazy like that. Use him as a running back sometimes, get him some touches there, throw him some screens, get some deep shots downfield, and see what he can do. And let's not put too much on him. From there, I think we should definitely turn down the expectations for anybody drafted after Bayless Jones, rookie production from these 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks are mostly going to be a bonus, right? For example, like Dominique Robinson, the edge rusher from Miami of Ohio, they drafted him as a raw developmental player. And you look at how late round edge rushers have done in recent years, they do not produce much as rookies. I mean, I think for Dominique Robinson, given how raw he is and how the production tends to be for players drafted in his spot, give me some flashes of great athletic ability, of rare traits. Some of the things we saw at college, show us more of that. And that might mean rotating in on some third downs, and maybe that's 2 sacks. 1 or 2 sacks would be, I think, a great rookie season for Dominique Robinson. There's been some good OTAs hype for how well he's looked physically at practices so far. That does bode well. I would also say it wouldn't stun me if he spent this season on the practice squad, just given how raw he is. That doesn't mean he's bad. Doesn't mean it was a bad draft pick. It just means when you're drafted in the 5th round or later, you never know. It's easier to get that player on the practice squad. Most likely, he'll be on the 53-man roster. He'll rotate in. He'll have some snaps and make some flashes. Yes. I wouldn't be stunned, though, given how raw he is, if they didn't try, perhaps, to stash him on the practice squad. We'll see how the rest of the depth at the edge rusher, certainly if they trade Robert Quinn, that's a separate discussion for later, but that's sort of where the range of outcomes would be. And I don't think it would be this bust, massive disappointment if Robinson started on the practice squad this year. You'd like better. You're hoping for better. He should be capable of better, and I would think he probably will do better, but I don't think that's a referendum on his ability as an edge rusher or his NFL career if they feel like they could probably get away with trying to stash him in this rookie season. If he does play, show me some flashes, show me some rare traits. Let's see some of that excitement that you feel like, maybe kind of like Travis Gibson, right? Where it's like, okay, he's got to build in this a little bit more, but maybe year 2, 7 sacks, right? That's what we saw from Travis last season. Given that, but foundationally, Travis had, I think, 0 sacks his rookie season, but there were still some of those flashes, those moments of like, okay, I think there might maybe be something here worth exploring a little bit more. Thinking that's going to be how it goes for a lot of these later round picks this season, especially for offensive linemen. When you get in the 6th and 7th rounds, take the expectations down again, another notch here. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't expect anything from any of them. We'll kind of go through, okay, what is realistic and what's not next on Locked On Bears. Just because we're in June doesn't mean there aren't plenty of bets to lay down on this upcoming football season. And our friends at betonline.net are going to be the number one source for all of your betting stats and sports information. The latest developments, the latest news, the latest odds, and so much more. When you look ahead to the football season, you could bet on the Bears' win total this year. Over under 6.5 wins. Currently long shots to make the playoffs. And week 1 against the 49ers, Bears are currently 6.5 point underdogs for that game. But BetOnline has so much more than just football futures. You got the NBA Finals, hockey in their conference finals, Major League Baseball season well underway, fighting news from MMA to UFC and boxing, so much more. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, live betting, esports, and so much more. Head on over to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action you need to know. BetOnline, where the game starts. For the most part, I think we can group the day 3 offensive linemen into a similar category. I would say, given where Braxton Jones was drafted in the 5th round ahead of Zachary Thomas, Doug Kramer, and Ja'Tyre Carter, Braxton Jones would have a slightly more of an expectation, I think. But generally speaking, those guys, in my mind, serve as more like offensive line lottery tickets that, like, you hope maybe one of them can cash in. But other than that, you wouldn't necessarily expect, certainly, I think it's not fair to expect any of them to start this season. There's some hope that maybe Braxton Jones could be a starter. Maybe Zachary Thomas could be a starter, could compete if they don't bring in any more right guards and just kind of keep in the guys they have there with Sam Mustipher and Dakota Dozier, that maybe one of those rookies could compete at that right guard spot and earn a potential starting job. I would want the team to be in a better place personnel-wise, that you have a better option than a 5th or 6th or 7th round pick starting at right guard, less out of necessity. I mean, that would be ideal there. I think for Braxton Jones, I would like him to make the 53-man roster. Any of the other 3, it's a bonus if they make the 53-man roster. For the most part, I would expect Doug Kramer, the center from Illinois, to probably be a practice squad player his first year, because Sam Mustipher, unless he's purely starting at right guard, will probably be your backup center. And even if he is starting at right guard, he might still be your backup center, like they did last year with not really rostering a whole backup center. I know it's a new regime, but just goes to show that like they don't necessarily have to keep a dedicated pure backup center. And I would guess Kramer is probably destined for the practice squad. Probably the same for Ja'Tyre Carter from Southern, again, being the 7th round pick with the least invested in him, and also coming from a pretty small school and having a lot of development to do, and maybe kicking inside to guard after playing a lot of tackle in college. Practice squad probably more likely for him as well, and that's fine. Doesn't mean it was a bad pick. Doesn't mean he's never going to be any good in his NFL career. It just means that you were one of 4 offensive linemen drafted on day 3, and they're not all going to make this 53-man roster. Braxton Jones probably will, and given the sort of pedigree and expectations that Zachary Thomas seems to be bringing in, there seems to be some excitement, some hype for him. He has a decent shot there. I still think the Bears are probably going to bring in at least one more veteran offensive lineman before week 1, if not multiple veteran offensive linemen. And then the more you add, the more players then it would push down. As you start to look at the roster right now, either Julian Davenport or Sean Coleman will probably be your number 3 offensive tackle as it stands right now. And so then you keep 4 with Braxton Jones, or do you think Jones can maybe play some guard? And then is Zachary Thomas your other backup guard, or do you keep Dakota Dozier, heaven forbid, or Latavius Simmons? I mean, as it stands right now, there's an opportunity for multiple rookies to make the 53-man roster. Again, kind of hoping, expecting somewhere in between, maybe both, that they do bring in at least one more veteran offensive lineman with all the extra salary cap they currently have. I think they have the 5th most cap space of any team in the NFL. They added just over $7 million on June 2nd. They already had like $15 million, so I think they're up to like $22 million in total cap space. They got some room to add players here, and we're still expecting them to. We broke down that salary cap situation on the podcast last week. We broke down how they just got a nice truckload of cap space, and then we looked at the best available free agents still. All of them, I don't think anyone signed since we did that podcast, still available at offensive line and wide receiver. If you haven't heard those, go back and take a listen to get a sense of where the Bears sit financially right now, and sort of why we're waiting for them to maybe make another move, but why it could also be until training camp when they get to see the guys with the pads on before they bring in another offensive lineman. So there's sort of a mixed bag there, but Braxton Jones probably should make it, but not going to be disappointed if he doesn't. The rest of the guys would be lucky to make it, but not a bad thing if they end up on the practice squad. Kind of feels similarly for the running back Trestan Ebner and the safety Elijah Hicks. If they could make the 53-man roster, it'd be great. It would be exceeding expectations, I think, if they make the 53-man roster as, again, a 6th round pick at running back and I believe a 7th round pick at safety, especially the safety, given the depth that they have at safety with Brisker, Jackson, Cruikshank, and Javonte Houston-Carson. Elijah Hicks is almost certainly destined for the practice squad then as a rookie. And if you were to be able to beat one of those, or I guess force them to keep 5 safeties, that would be exceeding expectations. For Trestan Ebner at running back, you got Montgomery, you got Herbert, and then Darrington Evans is not guaranteed that number 3 role, and Ebner will compete with him. I think typically you might see the veteran get the spot over the rookie if all other things are equal, and Ebner could be more of a practice squad player this season, but he does have some return ability, some great receiving ability as well, but that 3rd running back spot is going to come down to special teams, and so if he can make the 53-man roster, that'd be great, and would signal that he is progressing on special teams and able to make a contribution there. But again, would be great if he did, otherwise I'm not going to be super disappointed if he doesn't, because that's just not how it tends to go for rookie running backs, at least rookie 6th round running backs. Khalil Herbert, more the exception last season than the rule. The punter, Trenton Gill, is a different story because he's their only punter. Like, he's got to be the guy, and the bar and the expectations kind of shift for punters. I don't know how to say, it's not like there's a number, right? Oh, Trenton Gill needs to average 45 yards per punt this season. I'm not as worried about that. For me, for Trenton Gill, it's like, don't mess up the field goals if you're the holder, which is likely to be the holder. Don't botch any of the holds on field goals. Don't shank punts. And certainly, don't get cut, and don't bust out. Don't make them replace you midseason. That's the bar for Treston Gill. If he can start to finish the season as the starter and not screw up field goals and not shank punts, I don't care where he ranks in yards per punt and hang time. You want those to be good, but 7th round rookie, whatever. Just don't mess up. Don't screw up. Keep your job. Good enough for me. 7th round punter, all set with Trenton Gill there. So that's sort of trying to put these rookie expectations, in fair places. 2nd round picks can have a little higher expectations, but not too high. 3rd round pick at wide receiver, let's bring it down maybe from where the hype is getting a little bit with Bayless Jones. And I think build and get excited about it, but 200 to 300 yards would be plenty, I think, from him. And then, the late round picks from there are a little bit farther down. So that kind of gives us a sense of, okay, they're going to play some roles, but let's not ask them to do too much in those roles. I know it's not it's sort of dampening things a little bit. We can hope for more, but keep our expectations reasonable. Try and prevent disappointment or otherwise unexpected outcomes here by setting those expectations properly right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So hope you'll keep tuning in to keep up with all of our daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Just a programming note for you. We get into this time of season every year. We go into off-season mode officially in June and for most of July here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, but in these 2 off-season months of nothing going on, we switched to 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week. So it's your team almost every day for these 2 months, but then we'll be back to 5 days a week and so much more for training camp and get you all ready to go. So we'll miss intermittent days here. I don't know if we'll do every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or depending if there's Bears breaking news, maybe we'll jump in on a Tuesday or a Thursday and go out of order, but expect more like 3 a week, barring big breaking Bears news. And consistently we'll have a Monday podcast, probably consistently have a Friday podcast, a Wednesday podcast. And then whether the third one is Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday, we'll kind of see how the weeks go. But we'll still be here for you. We're still here to help you get through this offseason. Hope you'll keep making Locked On Bears your first listen. Every day there's a Locked On Bears podcast because that's going to be the best way to keep up with our Bears coverage, even when there's no other Bears football going on. And I think as a result, that's going to be the best way for you to bear down.